started. People on YouTube, let me know if you can hear us. Okay, here is the agenda. Pretty normal. Let's see, testing and release updates. We found a small issue in a couple of tests. These actually manifest as like it's going to be fine on your end because the test should fail, but it fails for the wrong reasons. And that has opened up a little bit of a can of worms discussing whether we should handle this empty attestation case because it's kind of an exceptional signature case. There's an issue and we're soliciting feedback from client implementers on the Eth2.0 specs repo. This we could introduce what would be a breaking change to the spec state transition when we bump to the IETF standard, if people want to do that. But we could also handle this exceptional case as it currently is in the spec. So please take a look at that issue and let us know what your thoughts are, because it affects you. Other than that, there are a couple of clarifications and tightened gossip conditions in the dev spec for networking, and I do expect none of this is breaking with respect to v0.11.1. I think sometime in the next week, if we accumulate a couple more of these minor networking changes, non-breaking networking changes, will release a v0.11.2. If you're interested, go take a look. There's a couple PRs that Paul helped us with recently. Cool. That's what's going on my end. Any other updates on testing releases?
Small updates. So testing tooling has been improving. For others to look at their state transition more and see about optimizing that. And there's now the Python spec is optimized and running reasonably fast. At about 40 slots per second on Lighthouse testnet without BLS though. However, then the Serenity within Go also has been forked and modified, and together with the rumor tooling, the network tooling from earlier, it's doing 49 slots per second with BOS and 217 slots per second without BOS. And this is still without compression or cache decompression of cookies or other BOS optimizations. And then all this tooling is in use for network testing. And we have Laxman on the call, I think, who can give an introduction and share progress on network testing.
Yeah, hi guys. So I'm working on basically creating a network testing suite using Rumor. The idea is that just like simple like feature and like RPC tests can exist in CI, as well as a couple like multi-client tests to check like that propagation works. Still, the basic infrastructure exists. I'll share the repo in the chat, but still pulling things together. I'll probably show up in people's Discords asking questions about setting up clients. Yeah, more on that soon.
Cool. Thanks, Lakshman. Other testing updates. I did see in the chat that Alex has reopened the fork choice tests that he'd been working on and updated them to 10.1. But I need to dig into the issue that he opened. So take a look there. Okay. Any other testing updates? Great. We're going to switch to clients. As you may have saw in the chat, we're interested in just getting a simple list what the last things you need to get in place to be able to stand up a single client V011 testnet. And this, if you can just get me a list of those things by the end of tomorrow, it'd be really helpful to help with planning in the next couple of weeks in terms of like targeting testnets and multi-client things. In addition to that, today, if you just have an intuition, have like on when you might be able to have these V011 testnets up, just let us know. But normally we'll just do regular client updates. We can start with Prismatic.
Hey guys, Rob from Prismatic here. Yeah, so we're running our V0.11.1 in a dev cluster with a real deposit flow. So just pending any other critical bugs, like we'll likely announce the genesis time and do the restart within the next few days. So nothing blocking in that direction. Aside from that, since last update, yeah, so we have better slashing detection all the way since Genesis. We now have proposer slashing detection given the proposer index and blocks. We fully revamped and optimized our initial sync. We integrated beacon fuzz from Sigma Prime and added fuzz targets as well for our P2P stack. We've been finding a lot of really easy low-hanging fruit through fuzz testing, so that's been really great. And aside from that, we also looking for a security audit for Prism. So we posted an RFP last Friday, thanks to support from the Sigma Prime guys and kind of feedback from them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We're just getting ready to launch things hopefully within 2 or 3 days, everything will be up.
Great, thanks, Raul. Lodestar.
Hey, so we're still working through the 0.11 changes. We just merged our 0.10 branch into master a few days ago. And we are about to merge in our disk v5 integration, so that'll unlock a lot of all the ENR based issues. I would expect that we'll probably have a bare bones something that we can, like a node that we can spin up and start syncing things to, probably by the next meeting. So, within a few weeks.
Great, thanks, Cayman. Lighthouse.
Hey everyone. Yeah, so from our end, we've updated everything to 11.1. As far as I know, everything's sorted there. So we finished off all the mainnet required protocols that we need, so we're kind of ready for that. We're just doing some internal testing, so we're still going to run an internal private testnet, try and iron out any other bugs with that. And then we'll also be doing a kind of a long scale, large public multi-client testnet for 11.1 with pretty much all the main protocols for the spec that we need for mainnet. For other kind of internal things that we've been working on is like kind of a more sophisticated peer management reputation system. We've started upgrading to Rust stable futures, which is kind of a thing we've been working on for a while. And we're looking at testing some of the snappy compression stuff that we've done in Gossip Sub and the RPC. So the RPC stuff we're going to try and test with Rumor, but I'd be curious to have a look at Gossip Sub as well. That's pretty much it from us.
Great, thanks, Age. Teku.
Hey guys, so the big news for us is we were able to sync to Lighthouse's testnet and catch up to and track the chain head, which is a pretty big milestone for us. We've made some general stability improvements in the last couple of weeks, which were crucial in allowing us to catch up. In terms of performance, we've implemented some optimizations to our remarkable implementation. We're now able to import about 7 to 8 blocks a second on average. That's with mainnet config 32K validators. We also finished implementing a new RocksDB backed database, which also gave us a little performance boost. We've done some work to improve attestation aggregation. In particular, we fixed some issues with block creation, which were causing us to fail to include a lot of attestations. We're just now starting to look at V11, but we should be ready for a V11 testnet in a couple weeks. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Meredith. Congrats on the sync. Very exciting. Nimbus.
Hi. So in terms of core spec updates, we are now at 0.11.1. We also checked that we are compatible with the CLI Genesis interrupt state. So the state if we don't bootstrap from if1 deposits. And we have the proto-array based fork choice that is almost ready. It's tested. It's not integrated into our block pool and attestation pool services. On benchmarks front, we added BLS benchmark suite, and we will provide a mobile benchmark on phones and Raspberry Pi soon. On fuzzing, so we had in a code base a workaround to skip Merkle proofs so that we could fuzz the consensus parts because we had an issue there, and this has been fixed, and now we don't need to have this skip Merkle workaround. On the networking front, we worked a lot on stability, hunted a memory leak in libp2p. We are still working on some edge cases in block syncing. In terms of features finished, noise libp2p is almost done. Snappy support is live. And on the discovery front, so we can discover and be discovered by Lighthouse, and we have been working on refinements. In terms of testnet, we are currently trying to connect to Lighthouse, but we found a case where we are in consensus with the CLI, but not with Lighthouse. So this is under investigation. And as a general on our code base, we are revamping our error.
Great. Thank you. Nethermind.
Still on 0.10 and now working on the synchronization and session management mechanisms to set the single client testnet more synchronized. That's it.
Cool. Thank you. And Trinity.
Everyone, mainly working on node stability of the client and then also the V11 updates. Nothing too exciting on the testnet front, but definitely should be ready to join in the next couple of weeks.
Great, thanks. And Musab from Runtime, do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, we're well, so not much in particular. We're still working on the models, both the cock model, safety for showing essentially the theorem bound on what is slashable in the setting of dynamic validator sets, and the K model giving an abstraction of the state transition function of the beacon chain, and linking these two. So yeah, so the work is ongoing, and we hope to be able to share this work with everyone within the coming few weeks.
Great. Thank you, Musab. Okay, I think I got everyone there. Afri or anyone want to speak about testnets? I know we're kind of in this interim phase where people are getting up to this testnet spec, but any updates people want to share, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I can give some comments on what I've been doing the last 2 weeks.
Great.
Last time I said that I was diving into Lighthouse, setting up a Lighthouse-based testnet, and in the meantime, I was able to make Teku synchronized to it. Right now, I'm figuring out if I can also add Teku validators. In the meantime, I bricked the testnet, so it's due to some network fragmentation, I discovered I lost finality, and then I lost ability to see new blocks. So I'm in the process of resetting this entire testnet. I'm trying. It's not kind of long-term goal. It's more like trying to find out what clients are capable of. And the main roadblock right now for multi-client testnet is that the clients are still working towards different versions of the spec. So I was focusing on clients that still implement the old version 0.10 spec in a more stable way. And therefore I focused on Lighthouse and Tiku first, but I'm looking forward for stable releases of the version 0.11.1 spec in all clients, so we can eventually broaden this up to more clients. Yeah. Yeah, and I gave this a name. I put my config on Schlesi on GitHub. It's called Schlesi. I think I linked it somewhere. If someone wants to join these efforts, just hit me up.
Great. Thanks, Afri. Any questions for Afri? Cool. We'll move on to research updates. Who wants to get us started?
I can chime in here.
Great.
I'll start off. Cool. Will from Quill. All right, cool. So wanted to give an update on some phase 2 stuff. And so you guys should be hearing some more announcements or releases soon. But through Stanford Blockchain, EthCC Paris, there was a lot of interesting discussions and developments. And so kind of just go, back for a moment and then what's forward from Quill. So one of the things that we had been working on pursuing was just general EE logic execution environments. And one of the some of the things that we were looking at was how do we make the state provider network work? How do we, how do we change the state dynamics? So we were looking at SSA versus DSA to make things a little bit more effective. And so there's a lot of interesting work that we did around that. And also keeping like the core protocol layer light, which kind of decouples some of the account logic from some of the client logic. And so that kind of gives some of the back period. So one of the things is we're trying to figure out how we can support getting to phase 1.5 in a practical system as soon as possible, and kind of avoid waiting for another indeterminate waiting period until we have this full new model ready. And so what we've looked at is just trying to be a little bit more practical and have a phased approach to getting EEs and moving that forward, and kind of starting off with one of the first chunks. And so what we're looking at is initially starting off with a case study and introducing account abstraction into ETH1 and some of the ETH1X efforts. That gets us a big chunk of the way towards EEs and some of the models around EEs. And so we're looking at that, and then also how to migrate ETH1 into an SSA format as well from DSA. One of the things that also like the EWASM team has been looking at is this concept of ETH1x64. And this is where you have kind of ETH1 and we continue to upgrade the functionality of ETH1 running on the 64 shards or running on a determinate number of shards. And so we've been supporting some of that research, working on some data frameworks so we can access some data and see how functional some of that is. And so one of the questions would be, in this phased approach, do we have ETH1x64 or do we create a new execution model from the ground up if it's a little bit too difficult to make some of these upgrades that we want to get to ETH to apply to ETH1? And so that is in progress. That decision would need to be made. So yeah, that's where we're at. So some of this work around account abstraction will answer a lot of these questions, and yeah. So just trying to get us to most functional ETH2 phase 1.5 as soon as possible. Otherwise, we've also been working on the ETH2 book, so that's been moving along, and that should be coming soon as well, and trying to get feedback on that. That's going to be going through the Moloch DAO here soon. We'll also have that up on Gitcoin Grants.
cool. To that end, I posted a write-up on how like the relationship between ETH2 and ETH1 client in such a merger, or at least with the single chain merger, could be extended to the 64. If you're interested in that ongoing work and getting involved in prototyping or speccing some of that stuff, take a look at that user research post I just shared. Cool. Other research updates.
Hey, this is Joe from TXRX. So we're working on an ETH1, ETH2 merge kind of requirements and constraints document. And that should be coming shortly, but we're in progress right now. We've updated Mothra, which is like this essentially libp2p in a wrapper so that you can kind of like control it, the latest spec version. And that's part of our work to build this network monitor called PRKL, which I'm told is a Finnish curse word. I don't know. And so to that end, we're also updating our simulator for disk v5, and as we mentioned before, our fork choice tests.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Other research updates.
Do we want to talk about hashes and polynomial commitments at all? And I guess the main update there has basically been that what we've been pushing forward on both the front of figuring out what the benefits would be of completely replacing Merkle trees with polynomial commitments. And we've also worked out that with some of the more recent kind of Plonk kind of lookup table type techniques, and there's like we can basically verify hash functions inside of us snark or a stark in a very low number of constraints. And so both of those paths are potentially quite viable alternatives to the Merkle trees, and potentially even in the fairly short term, like it might even make sense to kind of re-architect phase one with some of these ideas in mind in a couple of months or whenever, and work on those kind of other parts of phase one starts to really need to kick off. Like the benefits basically are that you get much smaller witnesses, you get erasure codes for free. We're also considering mechanisms where you can have self-verifying proofs of custody, so you don't need to have key reveals or challenge games. So that's all been moving forward.
Cool. Thank you, Vitalik. Felix, anything on your end with Discovery or otherwise that you'd like to fill us in on?
Yeah, so I just came out of a call with this research group that I have been talking to, and they have started working on creating a simulation as well. Although the goal there is mostly like to figure out the algorithm for the topics. So this is kind of something for a little bit later, and we are pretty much done now. Getting the grants proposal together for this work, and will be submitted, I think, at some point in soon, and then they can start working on the grant. But yeah, even right now, I mean, they've basically been researching a little bit like what could be ways to do the topic index in a sort of like simple to understand way, and it's yeah, they had some good suggestions already. And other than that, we've merged the Go implementation into the Go Ethereum master branch, and I'll just keep working on it. Yeah.
Cool. That's exciting. Thanks, Felix.
One update from me is that it's something I floated a few months ago, but basically Supranational, which is the main team kind of working on the VDF project, you know, they're ex-Intel people, and so they're very much into like performance computing, and basically they proactively started implementing a BLS 12.381 library, which is performance oriented, and kind of as a kind of key other goal is to be friendly to formal verification. And it looks like you know, we will have basically another three-way collaboration to basically develop this library between Supranational, a different foundation, and Protocol Labs. And so in terms of the performance, for what they've implemented so far, they're faster than Hirumi on every single operation. You know, like small performance gains, maybe, you know, 10-20% faster. But kind of the more exciting thing is that there's been kind of new ideas in terms of batch operations. So it seems that Hirumi is mostly interested in kind of performance in the when you do operations one by one. But if you do operations in a batch, which is relevant for Eth2, then you can get even more performance. So kind of in the absolute best case, I think potentially this library could be 2 times faster than Hirumi.
To add to the performance parts, I've been discussing with them on a batch API. It's actually, once you have the primitives that are fast, it's basically use init, update, and finish scheme. That's what I propose to them. That is similar to like SHA-256 hashing. And with those primitives, you can easily add any kind of batching on top, like batching, interleaving, checking proof of possessions, maybe dealing with public keys and messages that come as a pair or maybe as different arrays. And this is very flexible scheme. As long as you and you get the final exponentiation and delayed Miller loop that you keep for the very end to get all the performance. I can share my repo, my implementation. I suppose they will go for something like this, or maybe they have new optimizations on top.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're trying to incorporate all these ideas, and it turns out there's a lot of ideas for optimizations here. You know, because they've talked to various implementer teams, including Lighthouse and your team, and I think what we'll do is we'll write down, you know, as in the contract, you know, something that seems reasonable as a first attempt, but you know, having worked with them on the VDF project, they're extremely flexible, and they'll basically do what's best for us. If kind of the requirements change over time.
Thanks, Justin.
I guess
Yep.
another quick update is on the VDF project. So the Lihero team now have delivered both the academic paper, it's available publicly on ePrint, and the implementation, which is publicly available on GitHub under the Apache 2 license. And so we're basically going to start, hopefully soon, review, you know, security reviews of everything they've built. And you know, in terms of performance, you know, they have basically met the performance goals, you know, for over 1,000 participants in an MPC, which is, you know, an order of magnitude larger than anything that has been done before in the context of these MPCs.
Thanks, Justin. Any other follow-up questions for Justin? The project, I think timelines and things are still being sorted out, but the library would likely be usable within the year, right, Justin? And the formal verification ongoing audits might extend past that.
Yeah, that definitely. I mean, they've actually been working on it for several months, and they already hired someone basically full time to work on this, even before the contract closing. So yeah, they're very, very proactive, and yeah, I definitely expect the code to be usable this year. Probably not, at Genesis,
right.
But it will be a good, hopefully, drop-in replacement for Hirumi at some point.
Great, thank you. Other research updates? Okay. Next up is networking. Happy to discuss any items or issues you run into. I will gauge the temperature after this call and whether there's an appetite for doing a networking dedicated call next week. If not, we'll certainly do one the following week. It just kind of depends on how much is bubbled up on your stack and things that we want to talk about. But today, are there networking things people want to address? Great. Independently working on some APIs, but at the same time also attempting to conform to the Eth2.0 APIs repo. I think the outlier there is that Prismatic has an independent repo written in protobufs that has gotten some traction with some integrations. I think others have also been playing with the Lighthouse API to date. Some from Infura suggested to port the protobufs as the kind of canonical spec, or at least as a starting point, and generate HTTP APIs based upon it. There's an ongoing conversation, pretty good conversation, going on in this issue about this, and we've also hashed this out a few times before. It seems like people would rather write in HTTP and migrate to Protos rather than vice versa if the goal is to have a robust HTTP API. Another thing that I would like to address is the use of hex strings for bytes. I saw in some discussion on the Prismatic repo that was one of the sticking points for not wanting to utilize or begin to collaborate on the Eth2 APIs repo. So a few things. One, does the utilization of OpenAPI, HTTP APIs in this repo with CI that checks builds against migrating to protobufs so that we can have good specs in both, does that meet our standards? And two, am I correct in understanding that that was one of the main sticking points? Are there other sticking points for not bringing Prismatic fully into the fold and collaborating in the single repo? So first question, are there issues with using open APIs and, as someone suggested, adding in, well, one, doing due diligence on what it looks like to actually build protos from open APIs, and two, if that is reasonable, adding that into CI to make sure that we're not, that we can actually have this kind of dual conformance. Thoughts on that?
We just had a quick look that you could convert an open API into protobus, but didn't actually use it. That's about the extent that I know about it.
Right. I mean, one of the issues I think on both is that we have types that aren't well represented necessarily in JSON or Protos. And another option and I think that one that I have not had positive feedback on, but I will throw it out there, is to just define everything in SSZ and define a standard function to migrate them to either or. But that doesn't necessarily get us all the way there, and is certainly a non-conformant and strange decision.
Maybe this is something important enough to have a call. If not, if we don't do the networking call next week, for example, we can do a call on API next week.
I'm happy to do that. That would allow us to also lay out our arguments a little bit more and hash it out. But Preston?
Hey, Preston from Prismatic here. You've been following the thread. I haven't caught up on it this morning yet, but we haven't tried to use OpenAPI to protobuf. With that said, I don't immediately see any issue with that. Just about every field in JSON is a string, so just would need some way to distinguish between this JSON string is unsigned 64-bit integer, and this is some kind of byte array. On to your point about hex string versus base 64, I would say it's not a complete blocker. Like, it's not impossible for us to use hex string. It's just that we would have to write a little bit of conversion tooling, and that would just take some time, which has kind of been the hurdle that we haven't wanted to cross yet. Because if we don't need to commit that time, then we don't want to. So all things are possible here. It's just a trade-off on time.
So do you currently expose a JSON endpoint or just protos right now?
Yeah, we expose the JSON endpoint.
And your bytes are in base 64?
Yeah, that's the default. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, Danny, adding on to that as well, OpenAPI recommends using base 64 to represent binary data as strings over APIs. So we've been just sticking to kind of like the recommended standards on their documentation.
Yeah, understood. And look, as I said in the comment, I don't really care that much about the bytes format. If we can get conformance across clients and change the bytes format, that's fine. I think it was a decision made to have conformance with ETH1, but we're not even using the same fundamental structure of the API as ETH1. So we can discuss that a little bit more and address it. I do think that we have an opportunity to unify the efforts here and have a better experience for the people that are trying to interact with these clients. And I think that everyone here has that goal. So let's have a concerted effort to take this conversation to an issue, and as Mami suggested, reconvene on Wednesday to hash out any remaining items. Does that seem like a good idea?
I can create an issue to start that conversation.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. There's a multifaceted portion of the conversation. I think one is the proper agreed upon structure, the agreed upon what would be represented in the repo, how it would be edited, what CI would do. The other is there are the APIs that exist in Eth2.0 APIs. There are APIs that exist in the Prismatic Ethereum APIs repo, and there are a few different APIs probably that are hanging out in like Lighthouse and other clients that users have begun to use a little bit. So the second part of the conversation is to have a structured conversation about what we're pulling from these APIs to bring into a common place. I know there's some good stuff in the Prismatic repo. They've had a lot of users touch their stuff, and I think there's some good stuff sitting in some other repos too. And they're probably doing pretty similar things, but we just need to kind of conform and agree. And I think that
Well, I would just like to add
yeah,
quickly one of our concerns from the Infura side. The reason that we're approaching this with a bit of urgency is there is good work in the Eth2 API's repo specifying a validators API in OpenAPI. There's
Right,
nothing
but
in
there's
there
not
yet
user level
specifying the
APIs.
broader beacon chain API.
Yeah.
And so because Prism already has that, we thought maybe that could be a good starting point. But
Yeah.
ultimately, we're happy to support any effort to unify the APIs.
And agreed. So I think the second part of the conversation is expanding these APIs into user APIs and probably using a lot of the prismatic stuff as a starting point. Thanks, Mike.
What if you did a one-off conversion from the prismatic to whatever Swagger, and where would that land us? Like, would we gain any useful insights from that?
Oh, just to see
You mentioned
what
there was
it
tooling
looks like.
available. Yeah.
Certainly valuable. Sometimes tooling like that ends up with unreadable garbage, and sometimes it's nice. So we can try it out.
That could be an action item before the meeting next week.
Hey, just one quick thing on that. We have already generated Swagger documentation, api.prilabs.net. So you can take a look at how that looks. It's not too bad in my opinion, but let me know.
Mine from load setting, like descriptions, comments, restraints, and all those stuff. It's just as basic stuff as possible.
Got it. So you're saying that the auto-generated stuff does miss some of the core components that we want.
Yeah, basically we separated all the types and everything, so it's easier to maintain in the Eth2 APIs. And when we generate, you just get one blob with all those stuff incorporated, so it's hard to separate types and reuse types and everything.
Yeah, and I think that it doesn't generate any validation. So I think you guys have like, this is a field of this length validation within the OpenAPI spec. The thing that we're using does not do that. So.
Yeah, but the endpoints should be pretty easy to copy and just use the existing types instead of like auto-generated ones.
Okay. Oh, go on. All right. Okay, we're gonna open up an issue to hash out a proper unified format. We're gonna open up an issue to begin discussing the existing beacon APIs that are in the Prismatic repo and any that might lie in other clients to find a good set that works well. And we will open up an issue to discuss what migrating from Proto to Open APIs looks like, and also what generating protos from Open APIs looks like, and whether there's some sort of tooling things that we want to integrate into CI moving forward. And very likely on Wednesday, we will convene for what is hopefully a relatively short call, 30 minutes or so, where we can try to hash out the things that we've been discussing for the past week at that point. Thank you, Mike. This is something that I think has been at the back of our minds and some worries, but we haven't had the emphasis to kind of bring it all together. Okay, moving forward. Spec discussion. Anything pop up in your work on the spec recently? I know that's just a very tiny portion of your work these days. Okay. a reminder, the bug bounty program is out there. Find some bugs. People of the internet, find some bugs. I know there's been some people digging in. Be in touch. Okay, open discussion, closing remarks, anything else people want to just talk about today? Nothing at all. Great.
There is one request from the Catheter team. This is Pooja from the Catheter team.
Hey, Pooja.
Hi. There is this survey shared by Edson that is available in the comment section of agenda to collect some basic information about liking, frustration, fear, and suggestions about the current EIP process. We would appreciate developers taking out a couple of minutes to fill up the survey, and this will help us, the EIP improvement group, to prioritize and discuss the issues and the mitigation plan to improve the current process. I understand some of the developers in this call are also participating in the Ethereum 1.x call and also taking care of Ethereum 1.x. So it would be super helpful for us if you guys can take out a couple of minutes and provide the and fill up this survey. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just dropped a link in the chat. Thanks. Okay, great. If you can, please send me a list of the items left to be able to have a fully conformant V011 single client testnet. And if you have any estimate on when you think you're going to be able to stand up that single client testnet, obviously not, it doesn't have to be a long-term testnet, just being able to stand up a few nodes and run a testnet fully conformant to V011. Useful. We're trying to keep things moving on the multi-client testnet front. All right, thanks everyone. Be in touch. We'll plan on having this meeting in 2 weeks. We will have a APIs discussion on Wednesday, and very likely the following week we will do a networking call. But again, we'll take that one in stride, and we'll address that in about a week. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.